In this video, we'll talk about this idea of negative work, which is probably the most confusing aspect of work. Work in general is for a constant force, we'll get to variable forces later, is the cross product of your force vector times your distance moved vector, which becomes work equals FD cosine theta, where theta is the angle between your force vector and the distance through which it moves vector, which I'll just call vector D. But what is this idea of negative work? It's pretty frustrating. Well, before we talk about negative work, let's talk about money, and let's talk about giving. So here is a $5 bill. And you've got your hand on it. That is a hand. Yes, it is a hand. And nobody's there on the other side. And there's Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. There's a top hat. Okay, there's your $5 bills. Have you given it to anybody? And the answer is no, you haven't given it to anybody. There hasn't been a gift. There hasn't been a gift transaction, because there's been nobody to receive it. In order for you to give $5, somebody has to take $5. So this is true of any gift exchange. You cannot give something without somebody taking it. Now, don't push me on that too far. But if you leave this $5 bill on a table and walk away, and nobody's around, you haven't given it to anybody. Now somebody, I don't want to talk about the idea, somebody may come later and pick it up, but the idea is you haven't given it to anybody. There has to be a taker. So you hold that $5 bill out, and somebody else is going to grab it, and they will be happy to grab it. Who doesn't want money? I do. All right. So every gift transaction involves giving and taking. Your net worth, so to speak, goes down by $5, and this person's net worth, the amount of money they have, goes up by $5. And it's easy to see where the money is going. It goes from the giver to the taker or the recipient. That's obvious, right? Well, let me make something very obvious turn into something confusing, and started to do that. But suppose that we redefined what taking was. So on this side, there's the giving, and on the other side, there's the taking, or the receiving, maybe sounds a little nicer. Okay, let's redefine the word receiving, and let's call that negative giving. And so on this side, and we're going to clarify now that since we have giving on both sides, we're going to have to emphasize we're now going to have positive giving and negative giving. I know, kind of crazy. Who would want to do this? It makes no sense. But let's just say this is how negative work works. Okay, it works in exactly the same idea. If you are the positive giver, you are basically losing or giving up $5. So positive giving means you're the one who has the $5 and you transfer it over. And if you are negative giving, crazy I know, but instead of calling it receiving or taking or getting, we're going to say that you're negative giving. If you are negative giving, you are gaining the money. So you're gaining $5. Well, this is how it works with work. Okay, so we'll follow this on the next page. Is Positive work means you're giving up your energy into this other system. And negative work means you're taking in the energy. Let's look at an example in which you do positive work. Because it turns out that if you do positive work on something, there will always, always, always be that something doing negative work on you. Sounds a little bit like Newton's third law because it kind of is an application of Newton's third law. Okay, let's get started. We have you and a cart. And this is force of you on cart is 50 newtons. And you're going to exert that force through a distance of 5 meters. And we can see that the angle between your force vector and the distance moved vector is 0. And so work is FD times the cosine of the angle between them, and the cosine of 0 is 1. So we're just going to, pretty easy, we're going to say that the work you do is your 50 newtons of force through 5 meters is 250 newton meters, and that's 250 joules. And we know that basically what that means, now that we've used the definition of work, we know that you have put into the cart 50 joules. 50 joules. The energy that you have in your body has gone down by 50 joules. So let me write that here. So you have lost 50 joules, and the cart, presumably in kinetic energy, but I'll just say it's kinetic energy, no friction, and the cart has gained 50 joules. Energy analysis is always a zero-sum game. That's pretty straightforward, hopefully. Well, let's look at the exact same scenario, but now let's think about the force of the cart on you. All right, okay, let's do that. All right, so remember, you pushed with 50 newtons. Newton's third law says, without exception, the cart will push back on you just as hard, no exception. So this is the force of the cart back on you. And so that's 50 newtons. The magnitude is 50 newtons. But notice now that unlike before, where your force was completely parallel to the distance vector, in this case now we see that the force and the distance vectors are anti-parallel. I think that's the term. I'm not exactly 100% sure. All I know is that there's a 180-degree difference. If I redraw that force vector here, that's the force of the cart. And if I draw the distance vector, let's just call that D. And we can see that basically there's a 180-degree difference between the two vectors. Now let's go back to our work equation, our definition of work. Work is defined as the dot product between force and distance vectors, but that simplifies to FD cosine theta. All right, so work is, our force is a magnitude of 50 newtons. These are magnitudes now, no vectors. So the magnitude of the force is 50 newtons. The magnitude of the distance moved is 5 meters. Now the cosine of 180 degrees is -1. Oops, that's off screen here. -1. Okay, so let me move over a little bit. So, get out of there. All right, so we've got 50 newtons times 5 meters times -1, and we're going to see exactly the same magnitude of work. Well, there's no vector. There's the same amount of work done, but now it's considered to be negatives. So we're going to say that the cart does negative 250 joules of work on you. Okay, now that seems, what does that mean? Well, let's go back to this idea of giving, right? We have this crazy new definition of receiving now, of taking, of getting is negative giving. Well, the same exact thing applies to work. When we say that the cart does 250 joules of negative work on you, it just means that the cart is getting. So the cart is receiving, is getting, is gaining energy by this amount. Okay, so negative work means you're getting energy. Positive work, let me write that down. Positive work means giving up energy. And negative work means you are gaining energy. So, here's my recommendation is just see if you can step back, take 3 steps back and say, where's the energy going? Who or what is giving up energy? Who or what is taking in energy? The person or thing that's losing energy, transfer energy, is doing positive work. The system that's receiving the energy is doing negative work. Don't blame me. I didn't invent this nomenclature. Okay, bye.